And frankly, the CMO roles that have been most enjoyable for me are the ones where the CEO sees me as a key colleague and partner.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Leadership Rounds, a podcast shining a spotlight on exceptional clinician executives thriving and driving innovation at the intersection of business and healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Reena Pandey, and together we'll explore the wisdom and insights of great healthcare executives and craft a prescription for leadership success, one candid conversation at a time. Andrew, such a pleasure to have you join me on this podcast. We have been friends for longer than I think you or I want to admit. It will give away our age, but I am so thrilled that you agreed to join me for this conversation. As you know, I started doing this as a way to really shine a spotlight on fabulous healthcare executives who happen to be clinicians, who have made these wild transitions from academia or clinical medicine and have had an impact on the entrepreneurial or business world. I think there need to be more people like you. And so I'm in a fun position now to really spotlight and highlight the great things that people like you are doing. So I'm thrilled that you were willing and able to join. Appreciate it.
Well, it's an honor for me to be here. I have followed your career from when you were just a doctor back in the day, to your own transition to a wonderful health executive, and it's really an honor and a pleasure to join you, and I'm flattered to be invited.
Thank you. Well, let's take it back to the beginning. So you are a neuro-oncologist by training. We trained together at the same Boston institution, and then you practiced for a bit, and then you caught the bug. You ended up stepping out from the Dana-Farber and initially taking a role at IBM Watson, which no doubt was interesting, and then COTA, and now more recently OncoHealth. But I get the calls all the time and the questions like, how did you make the leap? What was it like? Walk us through your transition and the great parts of it, the challenging parts of it. I'm sure we share some of the challenges. Would love to hear your story, and then we can dig in.
Yeah, it's a story I enjoy telling, and it's funny because, for a long time you feel like you're junior faculty, and then you're a young, emerging health tech person, and then suddenly you look back and you've had a 20 plus year career and you're definitely not young and you don't have any hair anymore. And so,
did you have hair back then when we were training?
Yeah, actually, I suppose by the time I arrived at medical training, I was well on my way to being totally bald. So, fair point. But there was a time when I had quite a lot of hair. Anyhow, my career has not evolved the way I imagined or planned early. That's for certain. I had always wanted to be a physician. I loved the brain. From high school biology, I found the brain fascinating, and it was easy to sort of follow a linear and traditional path from college to medical school, and then to training in neurology. I ended up really falling in love with while I was in neurology training, and in fact, in the intern year that I shared under you as a medicine intern, I found oncology really interesting. In particular, sort of the patient challenges and the patient relationships, and that it was like that combination of an interest in neuroscience and the brain, with this sort of emerging love of oncology and cancer patients that took me to neuro-oncology. That whole track was very linear. Mm-hmm. And then I emerged as a neuro-oncology attending at Dana-Farber. And I would say that early, I started to worry that I didn't think I would be able to have the level of impact in my career that I had imagined. That's not to say that I didn't love caring for individual patients and find that work super meaningful and interesting, because I did. But but quickly I came to realize that I wanted to have an impact that was maybe broader than I could have seeing one patient at a time. And this is a theme I've ended up hearing
Absolutely.
from
Totally
others.
resonates for me. I probably use the same words in describing my jump.
It's so interesting. And so first, when you're deep in academia, which I had been and was, I wasn't quite sure what opportunities might exist. And it felt natural to explore within the academic institution. So I ended up taking on a role that I was very fortunate to find as the medical director of Dana-Farber's network. This evolving set of community practices that Dana-Farber was partnering with or acquiring in order to provide opportunities for patients to get care closer to home. And that work proved an incredible training ground for management and for system building, program building, and I did that for about 5 years. And what happened was, in the context of that work, I had an opportunity to implement or help implement a cancer treatment pathways system that Dana-Farber had been developing in collaboration with a private company called neuro-oncology. What I realized was, that the system had some limitations.
Sure.
And I thought that there was just amazing opportunity to use tools like that to improve the extent to which care can be delivered across geographies in a consistent, high quality, measurable way. And at a certain point, I said, geez, I think what I really would enjoy doing is working on systems like this.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of, trying to do this from within an academic center where the main thing they wanted me to do was see patients and work on clinical trials. And that was around the
like
time.
A side job versus the core of what you were doing.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And it was around that time that IBM had begun to invest really meaningful dollars in building Watson for healthcare. And I got a call one day from a recruiter who said, hey, we're looking for someone to lead our oncology and genomics offerings, which they described as mature
Yeah.
and world changing. And, this was 10 years ago. This was before LLMs.
Sure.
But the story was that IBM's systems could, read an EMR and pull out the core details of patient journeys and match that up against treatment pathways and recommend treatment. And it sounded incredible. And I took the leap and I left Dana-Farber for a full-time job at IBM Watson Health now about 10 years ago. The IBM journey itself was fascinating.
Hold off on the IBM journey for a second, because I still want to dig into this.
Sure.
This transition, because
the transition, sure.
Like I said before, and I'm guessing you get the calls all the time from younger clinician leaders who are, itchy and are trying to figure out how to, what they want to be and then how to go about doing it. Because I do think I certainly had the experience of not having any visibility into like what the world looked like outside of academia. It sounds like you were given or created this opportunity. I don't want to say just given, because it's never so straightforward, to be the associate CMO and to have this internal role where you were starting to think about, program development and all, right?
Right.
I don't think I had any sense of what was happening on the outside. So maybe talk a little bit more about like that, like how you got, IBM Watson sounds like the recruiter called you, but like, how did you start to understand like what opportunities were even existing in the world outside of our academic bubble?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll share a few things that I don't think you and I have ever talked about.
Okay.
Which is good. I think the first thing to say is, this appetite and interest just emerged.
Yeah.
And I think that interest emerges in a lot of people who are in academia. And the question is only, do you then go explore it? Because there's material inertia to stay put. And and I mean, inertia maybe isn't the right word. There may also be resistance to this exploration.
Yes.
In my own journey, I would say mentors were totally critical. Mentors also were obstacles.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is I found an unbelievable mentor in Larry Schulman, who's the chief medical officer of Dana-Farber, a medical oncologist, who was like so eager to have an internal physician to take under his wing and train up. He had done that with a previous, with Craig Bunnell, who was a medical oncologist, who went on to become the CMO of Dana-Farber when Larry left, and in fact remains the CMO now 10 years or more later. And I just walked into Larry's office and I said, "You don't know me, but I'm interested in, exploring different ways of working in oncology. And can we talk?" Larry had a lot of really good advice. And then, sort of fortuitously, he said, "Hey, it happens that I need a halftime physician," started as a halftime, "to help me with this evolving network." And Larry's guidance and support was absolutely critical to my journey. And then, on the converse side, my academic mentor, I remember talking to him about this emerging interest. And he said words. I'm not a person who remembers things like with great detail when they happen in the distant past. I sort of remember the themes. I remember these words like they were said to me yesterday. I sat down with him. I said, "Listen, I'm really interested in joining Larry." This was about staying at Dana-Farber.
This wasn't even about leaving the Farber, all told. Yeah. Oh, wow.
I'm interested in taking half of my time and working on, the business and management of Dana-Farber's growing network. And he said, "Andrew, I'm shocked." And he said, "Your career was on a meteoric rise and you're throwing it in the toilet."
Oh my goodness.
And those were the words. And I'll never forget that, because first, it was the first time he had told me that he thought my career was on a meteoric rise, which might have been nice to hear sooner. But the notion that following sort of my passion and interest in having a different way of impacting cancer patients was comparable to throwing something in the toilet it was deeply hurtful.
Yeah, sorry, keep going.
It took time to overcome that. I want to share one other sort of more positive side of this, which is I started asking everyone I knew if they had found if they had any tips or tricks related to exploring opportunities. And I ended up finding a friend of a friend who's a physician who had moved into the payer care management space. And he said, "Well, you need a coach." And I was like, "A coach?" And he told me that there exists in the world a small number of physicians who have created jobs coaching physicians who are sort of experiencing career uncertainty. And I ended up consulting with a doctor who lives in Maine, who has a consulting practice, a personal practice, and he was a career consultant. And for $100 per session, he chatted with me about the whole realm of what doctors can do outside of traditional healthcare. And I would say, today I have to imagine you can go to ChatGPT and say, "Help me brainstorm ideas about, jobs outside of healthcare." And I have a feeling ChatGPT could come up with a whole bunch. But this gentleman was awesome. I'll share his name because there's no reason to keep it a secret. His name's Steve Blattner. And I met with Steve maybe 5 times over the course of a couple of months, and he talked to me about pharma and consulting and payers and and startups and the benefits and potential disadvantages of each. And it really helped clarify my thinking. And I would encourage anyone to pursue something like that, whether with Steve or with you, Rena, or with folks like us who've kind of gone through this transition we're all happy to have these conversations.
Yeah, totally. I think, now there are more people like us. There's so many pieces of that story that threads that I'd love to pull on. I mean,
Sure.
So first on the positive side, there was, the fact
Yeah.
that you just walked into the CMO's office and said fearlessly, and I'm sure there was fear, but it sounds fearless. Hey, I'm interested. I want to learn. Tell me what options exist. I think is something to just focus on for a sec, because I think a lot of people close their own doors before any doors are even opened, right? Oh, they're not going to want me. Oh, I don't have the experience. Oh, X, Y, or Z. And I do think I sort of did some similar types of exploration with somewhat what I call ferocious curiosity. Hey, I just want to learn what exists, and tell me about your role, and tell me about this and that, right? And I think that's a good lesson for folks to just, without fear or self-sabotage, just ask. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, I think the downsides are very, very few, and the upsides are obvious. I think there's a reality that there are fewer physicians with this interest in the world than there is need for these roles. I think, had I known that then, it would have reduced the fear.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the interesting things, I feel like there's a community of people like us.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is invariably true is we really enjoy sharing our experiences,
completely.
transitioning from traditional medicine into this non-traditional world. So, when I sat down with Larry, I got the feeling he was thrilled. He was
People
thrilled
love
that
to
an
talk
academic
about themselves. Yes, they do. I tell people that all the time. I love to tell my story. Please call me, right?
Totally. And one of the pieces of advice I got from Steve Blattner that I also am grateful for, and that I give everyone now, is aggressive networking is so helpful.
Yeah.
And what Steve advised was, don't go into a meeting saying, "Hey, I'm here. Can I have a job?"
Absolutely.
Go into a meeting with, "Hey, I'm looking for guidance. What kinds of things do you think someone like me might be able to do that would be a little different than what I'm doing today? Help me understand. And are there other people you think I should meet?"
100%.
And if those are your goals, just curiosity about the world, meeting other people, you're going to find opportunities that make sense and open the right doors. And then, you've created it for yourself. And so that's really all it takes.
Yeah. I love that. My analogy is a spider web. And I've probably said this a trillion times, so people probably heard me say it, but it's really tough to catch a fly if you just have one web strand. But the concept of networking to me is you have to build the web little by little by little. And one conversation leads to one or two or three more. Each of those leads to one or two or three more. And little by little you have an extensive web. And then it's much easier for something to stick when it feels right than if you're just "Hey, do you have a job? Hey, do you have a job?" There's just a bunch of single strands. That network is so critical. And I used to think people shy from network building. It has this, I don't know why, but I think it has a negative connotation for some. But it's just friend making and learning and curiosity. And, I think then things can happen organically where unexpected.
I think that's right.
So the challenging part of your departure, or the spreading of your wings, let's talk more about. I felt the exact same thing. And I almost relate it to a breakup. There's so many wonderful relationship analogies. It's like a parent-child relationship on the one hand, or a breakup with a partner on the other. And I felt like I was disappointing my mentor. It's so complicated because a lot of my work was tied up a lot of their success was tied up in my contribution, right? There's grants on which I was a co-investigator. There's, there are days and weeks of clinical care that has to be delivered, of which you're a contributor. And the departing really throws a massive wrench in their needs. and so it was really hard. I shed a lot of tears after some of these tough conversations. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing authentically because, I went through some of the same stuff. And I think people need to realize you have to know that it's going to be hard and people will be disappointed, but you got to be true to yourself and what is right for you and your path forward.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's interesting the point you make that that your departure might have impact on the success of the PI or department head, and I think that's true. On the other hand, a good mentor, should care about the heart and spirit of their mentee.
Yes.
And if you're coming to them and saying, "Hey, there's a different path for me in this world, and I'm deeply grateful for the support you've given me to date," I think that the right thing is support and encouragement, and I hope there's some stories like that too. I haven't heard too many, but I hope there's some stories like that too. People coming out of academia where
I think
they just had
any
support.
relationship, it takes time to get there. And so with my mentor, we got there. In the immediate heartbreak, we were both sad and scarred. And then eventually, I think there was this appreciation that there is a way that I'm going to contribute to this world and it's going to be great. And and years later, actually, I sent a note to my clinical and research mentor, and we've stayed in touch, and he's been a champion. Once we got over the heartbreak, he became a champion. And I just said, look, I wouldn't be where I am without you. And I know I didn't take the path you had maybe envisioned for me. Chief of cardiology, president of the American Heart Association, whatever it might have been. But right. I did not succeed in this path. I would not have succeeded in this path without having had the foundation of being an analytical thinker and a great communicator and a nuanced clinical leader, right? Those pillars have stayed with me and I learned them from you and I'm grateful for that. So it was nice to share that back with him. I think
that's nice.
The nod. So, well, let's get to later in the career. So
sure.
You got to IBM Watson. Tell me a little bit about that experience. What was eye-opening? What was great? What was not great? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with what was great because it's easy to jump to the other. What was great was very smart people. From and frankly, the first time I had really worked closely with technologists and marketers and product leaders and salespeople. You don't interface with those folks. So just the opportunity to engage in that really multidisciplinary way, and frankly to do it from what was at the time, I think, a very strong brand name. We could have a meeting with anyone, anywhere in the world. You call up the NHS and say, we're IBM Watson Health and we want to talk to you about our products. They'd say, how's next week?
Exactly.
So that was very cool. I learned a lot about how business operates, how the industry works. The many and complex stakeholders.
Sorry to interrupt, but did you have your MBA at that point? Remind me when you actually got.
I got that. I got that during my time at Dana-Farber.
Okay, got it. So you already had at least some book, business training.
Some book knowledge. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had gotten it at Dana-Farber as a way to sort of learn the language, awesome. Which was a quite different language, and I did it purely online, which I highly recommend if you're a busy employed professional and are trying to learn language. So the downside at IBM, I would say fundamentally was and this gets to a principle that you and I have talked about with respect to the role of CMO in general. They were, and I wasn't the so-called chief health officer. I was his deputy, focused on oncology and genomics. But their vision for my role there was to sell products.
Okay.
To provide clinical credibility for sales. And why it was problematic just simply is that the products didn't work very well. And that was clear to me in the earliest days of my time there. And sort of my thinking about them as I got to know the products more deeply evolved from these don't work very well to these might be dangerous. And then suddenly I felt myself deeply conflicted. And I think we could spend a whole podcast honestly talking about this experience, because it was a challenging one. But at the end of the day, I stayed 9 months. Yep. Because there was a fundamental conflict between what they wanted and what I was willing to do without like compromising my own credibility and ethics. And so I didn't stay long.
Could you have figured that out before going there? I mean, and I'm asking because, right, I think this is a worry that clinician leaders face when they're stepping into a new world. They're putting their name and their brand oftentimes towards a product or a company. And how did you vet the opportunity or how might you have vetted it differently? And did you vet later opportunities differently based on what you learned in that experience?
You're getting right to the crux of it. In retrospect, I was profoundly naive. And in some ways, this has like been one of probably the most important learning points of my journey for me. I remember, I'm going to tell you something that was the reddest of flags. Okay. That young Dr. Norden completely missed.
Didn't even know to pick up on.
I asked for a product demo.
Okay.
And I think that was a good ask. The answer was, we're sorry, we cannot demonstrate the product because it's all highly confidential. We'll show you a video. And they showed me a marketing video. Okay. That was really
beautiful, I'm sure.
And I said, okay, that looks amazing.
Yeah.
So the learning is, one, during an interview process, you can go under NDA, and a good company should be willing to share, maybe not everything, but certainly how does the product work in a real operational environment.
Yes.
It particularly if a key part of your job is to help sell it. So I didn't know that was a phenomenon.
Right.
And were there some bells going off in my mind? What if this isn't legit? Yes, but I was sufficiently wowed by the IBM brand name. At that time, I don't know if you remember it, they were advertising everywhere. Yeah. They were powering the US Open of tennis. Totally. And, it was like, and everyone was talking about it. And I fell for it.
I know.
So what I've learned is be a skeptic.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that experience, like I was a skeptic by nature. That experience made me a real skeptic. When technologists claim that they have a solution to a healthcare problem, we're uniquely suited to ask the questions that need to be asked to figure out if that's a viable solution. And I trust those instincts now, and I push where I need to push.
Right.
So that's a mistake I wouldn't make again. But that was the core error.
Yeah. For me, I probably didn't vet as well as I would know how to vet now, be able to experience. I trusted the people to have, to a strong degree. Liam Donahue, who was the lead investor, who I had known for several years, and I had a lot of faith and trust in him, and met the team, and they did send me a lot of the stuff. Like, so they did let me get under the hood, which is now, I realize, a good sign. But I think there's a lesson we haven't gotten into, which is like when you didn't feel comfortable 9 months in, you stepped out, right? Like you knew enough to say, this isn't resonating for me. And I think in my experience, I got in and saw that actually it was a really trusted product and the huge, highly evidence-based and very quality assured. And I went, great, I can dig in here and let's prove it for the outside world and go run on it. And that was the next 10 years of my life. For you got in and went, I don't feel good about this. And you heard those instincts too. And decided to step out, which is a good lesson. And a reminder that folks that you don't have to have all the answers at the beginning. And you're learning and growing, and you can shift and pivot and continue to on in your career.
Well, I'll also say, I sort of fast forwarded through this portion of the story, but about 3 months in, once I had my feet squarely on the ground, I raised my hand in a very visible way internally, because I knew at that point either something meaningful was going to change or I was leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sort of willing to take the risk. And I spent those sort of second 6 months, or after the first 3 months, the rest of my tenure there, I really spent trying to make the case that this was not going to go well if they didn't make changes that would have cost implications. And I talked to all the people, all the senior people, and prepared decks and white papers. And I mean, I wanted to make it work. But when it was clear at the end of the day that there just was no appetite, that's when I said, okay, I'm out. And I was anxious about the notion of having a 9-month stint, on my resume.
On your resume, people get nervous about those,
Yeah, and I got advice.
Look, right?
I mean, I got good advice, which was, look, you had a 10-year career at Dana-Farber. Make sure your next step is a good one. And, and thankfully it was. And so, I think, I think that's right. There is a lesson. If your values are compromised, that's off the table, and it has to be.
Be true to yourself. Yeah, for sure. Well, you have had a couple later steps in your career, subsequent to the IBM Watson work. And, I would love to hear your perspective. I'm sure listeners would love to hear a perspective on how you were successful in those later roles, COTA, and then now at OncoHealth. And, I think clinicians are sometimes, we've chatted about this, I think clinicians are sometimes worried that they can't have impact right away. And you have been successful in that. So what did you do? And what lessons would you impart to others on how to be successful as a clinician executive right away, jumping into an early stage company?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the most effective ways to build early credibility is to be willing to do anything. We doctors have skills that are sort of broadly applicable. We're well organized, we're analytical, and so what that means is you can help out with tasks that maybe you didn't do in academic medicine, basic data analysis, or summarizing research data to help the marketing team, translating clinical language, whatever it is, doing sort of those tasks that you may deem menial, they're actually impactful. And if you do them well, you do them quickly, you make friends fast in a company just by being scrappy, flexible, open-minded, and doing what you say on time. Yeah. And so that's one, and then the other is, I think this role of being a clinical translator is a role you can take on in a big way from day one. I felt when I first moved into companies, I felt like everyone was smarter than me, and they definitely were about all sorts of topics. But when it came to medicine, no one was smarter than me.
100%.
So,
100%.
So if you step into the role of, I'm going to be the person who is always first in line to talk to the clinicians at the customer and translate what you're hearing for all the non-clinicians internally. Like that, you're ready to do it day one. And so, I think those are the two things that I think you don't need any additional training or preparation. Just be yourself, help out, and translate the clinical lingo. And then a lot of the rest follows on, over time. I mean, and what I would say there, sort of the overtime piece is don't comment on things that you're not ready to comment on.
Yeah.
I think that there are sort of these apocryphal stories about CMOs who come in and sort of take the position that they have like some superiority over others in the company because they're the only ones who really understand the guts of healthcare. And, maybe there's a modicum of truth to that viewpoint. But I mean, I think you have to be very humble about the reality that you've not run a business. You don't know finance and business strategy and marketing, and all of those are disciplines. And so I think when it comes to the things that you're really not able to be expert at, be humble, curious, learn. Like go out of your way to learn before you wade into, into those areas. And then you can, over time, you start to be able to contribute meaningfully there too.
Completely. Yeah, I had a great conversation with a public company CMO, and his advice was to clinicians, check your ego at the door.
Yeah, that's well said.
Check your ego at the door. And I do think some folks, you said superiority. I do think some folks come in and they're like, well, I've done all this training, but yeah, I mean, I was most successful, like you're describing exactly as you were, like just rolling up my sleeves and getting shit done. Like whatever you need, like send it over. I'm happy to help. It was also learning for me. Like I was in in this steep learning curve. And I was just like, yeah, sure. Data analytics, this, that, talking to clients, right? I was soaking it all in, which turned out to also, it was great for me, but it also turned out to be great for the company that I was so eager to help in any way I could, which was fun. And then, your point about like the other disciplines, they are all disciplines. Yes.
Totally.
I would qualify your statement though, which is not to not contribute to them, but to be more curious and a learner. Right. And so that you can, as you said, like later as you learn, you can be more of a contributor. But I do think also clinicians sometimes are like, well, I don't really know finance, so I don't want to talk about the numbers. But like, it's, I think, actually quite critical to wear all, or to appreciate all the hats and to see your clinical role in the context of the business needs, financial, operations, marketing, or otherwise. What would you say to that?
Oh, I think that's 100% right. I'm really sort of focused on, day one.
Yeah.
You don't want to make enemies by seeming like you're a know-it-all. However, I very much agree. And, that thinking was behind my decision to get an MBA.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be the only person who didn't understand basic accounting principles, or some of the rules of, there are equations and stuff behind operations. Like I wanted to understand those things. And I do think a good CMO can and should be a key contributor to corporate strategy, like should be sitting at the table with the executive team, with the CEO, and the other key C-suite leaders and materially contributing to the corporate strategy because you do have a unique angle. It's important. Yeah. So I'm fully aligned with you. And frankly, the CMO roles that have been most enjoyable for me are the ones where the CEO sees me as a key colleague and partner.
Absolutely.
And that's something, again, IBM days, I didn't know that I needed to look for. But there I had no material seat at the table. And in all my subsequent roles, that's been one of the key elements that I look for. I want a company that cares about infusing their products, their overall strategy with some healthcare perspective from inside.
100%. In the last bits of time we have together, we've talked a bit in the past about the different kinds of CMOs, right? The different archetypes or phenotypes of CMOs. Neil Shah, who joined me on this podcast not long ago, I've totally co-opted his indoor-outdoor cat framing.
I love
my
that.
team,
Yeah.
my team at Oxyon now thinks that I actually coined that, but I realized I have to give credit to Neil. But I do like to think about this internal, external, and like there's lots of different phenotypes. Where do you fall in terms of that type of chief medical officer you have been or aspire to be? Like, what are your strengths? And what are the other areas that maybe aren't as exciting to you?
I wish I had a colorful metaphor like Neil. That's a really good one. So I think I straddle the indoor outdoor cat framing though. For me, like some of the core sort of pillars of CMO work include a lot of the things we've alluded to. Product strategy is one. Sales and marketing is one. Obviously, that's very much external. Internal clinical operations is one. Evidence generation, and sort of proving the stuff. It is one. I think those are the and then maybe like just a general corporate strategist type. And for me, I have always gravitated probably most to sort of to product, and that is to say, like, how can we be sure that these solutions we're building that may be used by health professionals meet their needs? I just think clinicians have a really unique perspective there. But then when I'm working on a product that I believe is helpful in the world, there's nothing more fun than evangelizing that out in the market, speaking at conferences, speaking to customers, one-on-one, and so forth. And I think it also, to some extent, lends itself then to an evidence generation strategy, which is, I know this thing is working. We need to prove it. Now, I am not a CMO like for whom my deepest passion is analytical evaluation of our products.
Yep.
I think from my academic days, I understand the concepts well enough to sort of to engage in and even supervise that work. But that's not what gives me the most energy in my day. What gives me the most energy is sitting down with the product team to like sort of infuse the spirit of healthcare and patient needs, clinician needs into what we're doing, and then selling that in the world. And that's something, and when I'm proud of what we're doing, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I really enjoy.
I love that. I think what I've been encouraging folks to do is to really be thoughtful and self-aware about what they're good at on the one hand and what brings them energy on the other, right? Like hopefully those are the same things. For me, I sound a lot like you. I've loved being in market.
Yeah, we're similar.
To be the evangelist. And it became really easy when it was a product that I really believed in. And
Totally.
I think for your in your later roles, that's been true. Maybe not so much in your early role as you were describing.
Correct.
But yeah, and then to be alongside the product team, which wasn't obvious in the beginning. And I'd be curious your perspective there, because I think this role of clinician as product strategist or developer even, or product manager even, right, is new. We were recently retained to fill a clinical product role. And I thought, oh my God, that's great. Like, did anyone called us and said, hey, we need a clinician to be on our product team? I just was like so excited because I think it's still kind of novel to have clinicians deeply embedded in product as we did at Able to and as you have done in some of your roles.
Yeah, I don't know why it remains rare, but you're right. You're right that it does. And I definitely, I don't think that my view is not that clinicians should comprise the entirety of the product team, and that I think that product management is, like we were saying earlier, it's a discipline. And when done well, it's a really important and powerful one that, that's critical to the business success. So I guess my view is one, medium and large product teams in healthcare should have a clinician on that team, with a relationship to the CMO, but not necessarily reporting to the CMO. And I think at the end of the day, whether it's a small or a big product team, the partnership between the product and clinical leadership is really, really critical. And actually, I remember a podcast you did, Rena, I think, with your head of product for
yes,
too.
Pete Shalick, and I did one for A16Z
you talked about,
with Julie Yu. That was fun.
You talked about this very issue. It's critical, but when it works well, man, it is fun. It's fun for everybody because it really, I think, helps build confidence. It's like you have a key shadow of the customer talking to the product team directly all the time. And I think that makes for better products.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So in the last minute here, we could talk forever.
We could.
I know. We have not touched on. But any last thought or something I haven't asked you that you really wish I had asked you that you want to comment on?
Something I want to get out there. Okay, I'm going to end on a provocative statement.
Okay, go for it. Something controversial, something to pique people's interest. Go.
Yeah, and look, maybe this will provoke enough interest that you'll invite me back one day. So I am the CMO now of OncoHealth. I've been here for 5 years. OncoHealth is a really cool oncology company that is involved in sort of the full spectrum of oncology care. But the customer is the payer. So we provide utilization management and virtual supportive care services to members of health plans. And I never imagined that I would be the chief medical officer of a company that spends a lot of its time in utilization management. And I would say this is a particularly challenging time in the world to be the CMO of a company that does oncology utilization management. And I guess I want to go on the record as saying that utilization management has some benefits too. Cancer care is profoundly expensive. And cancer treatments have terrible side effects sometimes. And so it's important that we do a really good job making sure that patients get the right treatments. And I think with the pace of innovation in particular, it's just a critical need today that doctors get some support. And a second set of eyes helping them make optimal decisions. We absolutely need to make that easier. And less burdensome. And man, it can't delay care. And we have to be doing everything we can to ensure that it never delays good care. But some of the things that I see would shock you and your listeners. And I think we're providing an important service. So, we do it from the frame of how can we make sure that patients are getting the right treatments, and ones that are cost effective too. So, I'd love to talk more about that one day, with you. And
I appreciate the perspective, and it is sort of controversial to say utilization management could be great, right? Said no one ever, but I think you're inadvertently making a pitch for the importance of a strong clinical voice in the decision-making process about how utilization management types of programs are built and are deployed. There is a need for checks and balances for the system and cost and for patients and their safety. And totally. I think if you have a trusted voice like yours, deeply involved in the development of programs of this nature, that goes a long way to making sure it's done right and for the right reasons. So, another plug for, a great clinician executive, whose mind is focused on doing the right thing in a very mission-oriented way. Then it becomes not so controversial, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we need to be ever working to make sure that it's as, that the burden is as minimal as possible and that the patient is at the forefront of the thinking.
Exactly.
And when we do that, there are some benefits.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Well, it's such a treat to share this time with you and to have this conversation. It's just been fun for me to just watch other people's careers grow and blossom and to see the kind of impact that people that I trained alongside have had in the business world and entrepreneurship. So I'm super grateful that you carved out a little bit of time to join me here. And I'm sure people listening in will love the pearls of wisdom that you have shared from your own authentic experience. So thank you.
Well, I certainly hope so. And, Rena, I wasn't lying when I said I've long admired you and still do. And it's really been an honor. And this was fun, too. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Leadership Rounds, where clinician executives share wisdom and insights on what it means to be an exceptional leader in healthcare. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe, comment, and share with your friends and fellow leaders in healthcare. Join us next time for another dose of leadership wisdom. Until then, I'm Dr. Rena Pandey. Thanks for listening.